Hi, so our group decided to do the terminal. My name's Kaylee.
My name's Ashley.
I'm Danny.
My name's Helen,
I'm Jake.
Jonathan.
and this is an analysis.
Like we said, we're doing the movie The Terminal. The Terminal is from 2004. It's directed by Steven Spielberg, starring famous actor Tom Hanks. During this presentation, we will look into the intercultural dimensions of the film, including the verbal and nonverbal communication styles present, Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory as it relates to the film, the stereotypes within the film, and how the film portrays intercultural relationships. Before looking at these different and insightful dimensions, I'm going to present a brief overview of the film to give some background and context for those who have not previously viewed the film. Famous and well-known actor Tom Hanks plays the main character named Victor Navorsky. Victor flies to the JFK airport in the Big Apple, New York, from his homeland. He flew to New York with high hopes to visit a famous jazz club and meet a jazz artist to collect his autograph. Victor's father passionately collected jazz artist autographs in a small can throughout his lifetime, and there was only one autograph left that he did not receive and put in the can. In hopes to honor and remember his beloved father after he had passed, Victor has determined to get this last and final signature. While he was in the air traveling to New York, a civil war broke out in his very own homeland. Because of this crisis situation, the U.S. does not recognize his homeland as a country, and Victor's passport becomes invalid and unrecognizable. This places the poor, lonely man in an impossible and detrimental situation, and in between where he's no longer able to step foot outside of the airport and onto American soil, but he's also not able to fly back to his homeland. He becomes stuck in the terminal and resides there for nearly 9 months. This film shows Victor's loyal devotion to honoring his father and attempting to fulfill his father's greatest dreams as he is stuck and feels rejected by two countries. In addition, a fascinating romance occurs between Victor and a flight attendant named Amelia. Amelia finds herself bouncing between different relationships and never grounded in a stable relationship, like a plane is never grounded and still. In contrast, Victor's relationship, he finds himself stuck and unable to fly, unable to move, and unable to be free like a plane. Though Victor and Amelia are drastically different in their circumstances, both physical and emotionally, they both find themselves disoriented and lost in a way which brings them together and unites their hearts and minds. Their hearts are knit together in a unique way that reflects the movie. We will now move on to the analysis of different cultural dimensions.
Alrighty, so I have verbal communication. Verbal communication is a way for people to express themselves through work, emotions, information, and ideas. This plays a crucial role in the terminal because it's about a man coming from a foreign country who's trying to make his way to America, but has very little way to communicate with those around him. In the film, the main character, Victor, faces a unique challenge because he finds himself stuck in an airport terminal. His home country is going through a potential crisis, leaving his papers and passport invalid. Throughout the movie, Victor's ability to communicate verbally allows him to get through and manage communication, which allows him to move through the environment, foreign relationships, and overcome the challenges, overcome the challenges and position he's in. The film shows how words, tone, and communication can bring the cultural difference together and help people connect even in difficult circumstances. One of the most important and most used forms of verbal communication in this film is Victor expressing his emotions. Victor often struggles with frustration, confusion, and loneliness, yet he communicates through his feelings to other ways to help both make it subtle and clear. From the movie, you could see he really struggles with English and had a hard time using his words. For example, when he tries to explain his situation to the airport officials, his limit of English makes communication difficult. But he carefully chooses his words, gestures, and tone to make himself understood by officials. These verbal exchanges allow the audience to emphasize with his struggles because only the people going through it can truly understand how one is hurting and how the audience is able to empathize with him. One thing I noticed Victor doing well was staying determined and getting his point around and demonstrating patience with his actions through his aggression. Overall, verbal communication is necessary for communication. In the terminal, verbal communication was essential for Victor to express his emotions, resolve conflict, and form a relationship. Victor decided to choose his words, his tone, and dialogue, which helped him overcome the language barrier that were placed in front of him, navigate a complicated situation, and connect with people from different backgrounds in the complex environment he was put in. The film highlights how powerful verbal communication can be when going through complex, difficult situations and resolving problems that have been created and help him understand. That being said, verbal communication is just as important as nonverbal communication.
Throughout the terminal, nonverbal communication is used often to show how Victor navigates a very vulnerable culture in which he struggles to communicate verbally due to his broken English. Stripped of his native language and status, he falls back to nonverbal communication to survive in his new environment. There are three distinct functions of nonverbal communication that I address here. One being the assertion of power, shown through the character of Dixon, building community, shown through the relationship Victor has with Enrique and the shared respect of the construction crew, and the expression of universal empathy, shown through the medicine scene. So, for power dynamics, Dixon. Uh, from the get-go, Dixon uses verticality and barriers with his windowed balcony and desk to enforce dominance. He also doesn't care about boundaries, smashing a bag of chips onto Victor for the sake of it. He uses invasive gestures like choppy hand movements, finger pointing to intimidate his opponent in arguments. For building community, Victor develops a friendly and transactional relationship with Enrique by interpreting and reporting on the nonverbal acts of Dolores and telling him about it in exchange for food. They become good friends for it. Later on, as Victor sees a picture from Amelia's phone about a fountain, he begins to work on it, an unfinished one, in the terminal. And he has to do it by himself, and he just keeps working. But eventually, the construction crew take notice of it, continue watching him, and eventually join him without any words needing to be said. It's community-based or made from shared action. And then for universal empathy, the medicine scene. This is when a Russian man is stopped from bringing medicine to his sick father. When Victor approaches, he sees the stress of the man trying to bring medicine to his father, the shaking, the crying, and uses it as context to decide what he was going to do, which is lie to the guards and convince them that it's actually medicine for a goat. While the nonverbal and verbal interactions that happen throughout the movie show how several characters navigate through immediate conflicts and situations, the behavior behind each character is ultimately rooted deeper due to cultural frameworks within that are invisible to others. This aspect of the terminal is best analyzed through the lens of Hofstede's cultural dimensions. Giving it to Kaylee.
So I'm going to be going over Hofstede's cultural dimensions. In the terminal, Victor Navorsky's collectivist, long-term oriented, low uncertainty avoidance mindset clashes with the individualistic, rule-driven, and highly controlled culture that is the U.S. airport bureaucracy. While officials like Dixon embody high power distance, strong uncertainty avoidance, and masculine short-term priorities focused on efficiency and achievement, Victor navigates the terminal with patience, cooperation, and relationship building. This contrast highlights how differing cultural values, hierarchy, individualism, flexibility, competition, and restraint shape the characters' behaviors and drive the film's central tension between empathetic human connection and rigid institutional systems. For power distance, Victor patiently accepts hierarchy. Airport officials hold a rigid authority, creating a tension over fairness and rule compliance. For individualism versus collectivism, airport staff prioritize procedure and self-reliance, while Victor builds community, helps others, and gains support through collectivist values. For uncertainty avoidance, the airport's strict documentation and processes aim to eliminate uncertainty. Victor adapts easily to ambiguity and change. For masculinity versus femininity, Dixon embodies competition and achievement. Victor represents cooperation, empathy, and relationship building. For long versus short-term orientation, officials like Dixon seek quick fixes to get Victor out of the airport, while Victor endures months to honor a term-long promise to his father. Indulgence versus restraint, bureaucracy restricts personal freedoms. Victor still finds small joys like friendship, community, and acts of kindness. These cultural dimensions not only shape how characters behave in the terminal, but also influence the assumptions they make about Victor. As these values clashes and play out, they often serve as stereotypes, both harmful and seemingly harmless, which directly affect how Victor is perceived. This leads into the ideas of stereotyping, where Jonathan examines how stereotyping shapes Victor's experiences throughout the film.
Thank you, Kaylee. In the terminal, we see how stereotypes shape the way immigrants are perceived and treated in the United States. America has long been known as the nation of immigrants. However, over time, opinions have become more divided whenever there's more coming in. These oversimplified beliefs are used in a manner that usually insult groups of people. One of the strongest examples in the movie is how Victor's viewed when he first arrives at the JFK airport. Instead of being seen as a confused traveler that is in an unfamiliar setting, he's treated with suspicion, especially by the movie's primary antagonist, Frank Dixon. He immediately labels Victor as a suspicious foreigner who must be trying to take advantage of the system, even though Victor's situation is completely out of his control. Dixon's narrow assumptions prevent him from seeing Victor as a real human being, further holding him back. This lack of sympathy becomes a major barrier between them and highlights how negative stereotypes can truly distort somebody's understanding of another person. The movie also shows more subtle, everyday stereotypes against Victor and more, especially against other immigrants. When Victor first encounters airport staff, which speak to him slowly and repeat after themselves or simplify their language even, assuming he wouldn't understand. I don't take this as offensive because, in fact, I did this whenever I first traveled abroad, and people treated me like this too, but I didn't find it very offensive. Many people do it instinctively, especially when facing a language barrier. It's not too harmful of a stereotype, but it does show how quickly people are to make assumptions and adjust to those assumptions over somebody's appearance based on where they are or how they speak. Interestingly enough, the movie also explores positive stereotypes. Take that as you will. Some characters assume Victor has certain European traits, like being hardworking, resourceful, or even being stoic. While these are flattering, they still limit him to a simplified idea rather than acknowledging him in his full personality. In Victor's case, these assumptions actually help him find work, with contractors showing that society often relies on these stereotypes. However, the movie reminds us that even good stereotypes can reduce somebody down to a concept. What ultimately counters these stereotypes in the movie is a genuine human connection. As characters like Oscar Torres, Joe, or Enrique spend more time with Victor, they begin to see him for who he really is: kind, determined, and very much human. The labels and assumptions start to disappear once they take time to understand him. In the end, the terminal uses Victor's journey to highlight how stereotyping, negative, neutral, or positive, can shape the way we treat others. And speaking of relationships, I'll pass it off to Jake with intercultural relationships.
The Terminal is a great film to look at intercultural relations. The first one I'd like to talk about is Victor and Dixon. Dixon is a very hostile, rule-oriented person with very little patience for Victor. He's always trying to get in the way and get him out of the airport because he views Victor as a problem that needs to be solved immediately. That's just the culture of Dixon's job, so it's not really his fault. That's just how he was brought up in his job to fix the problems, get rid of people. A really good example would be Victor and Gupta. He's one of the janitors in the airport. They both have shared immigrant identities, so they were able to connect with being immigrants. Gupta was able to work with Victor to provide food and advice to stay away from Dixon and how to stay in the airport longer and survive. Although Gupta was very hesitant with Victor at first, they really warmed up together and opened up. And at the end of the film, we see Gupta sacrifices himself for Victor. Um, the last one I'd like to talk about is Victor and Enrique. Enrique works as a food service um, representative. The language barrier between both of them made it very difficult to communicate. However, they were able to move past this later in the film. They created a really strong bond together with Victor delivering notes to one of someone that Enrique fancied, Dolores, in exchange for food. So Victor was able to solve his food crisis through Enrique. They spoke for a long time, and Victor helped Enrique build up his confidence to talk with Dolores and win her over. So they got really close with this. We see throughout the film that the relationship between both of them started off as very transactional. Victor would deliver notes in return for food, and that was kind of it. Until it started to blossom into something more, which was a more personal relationship. And this ended up helping Victor a lot throughout the film because Enrique would speak highly of Victor with the other employees that had kind of a bad representation of him. And it kind of really set the foundation for all the other future relationships that Victor was able to make in the film. Moving on, we're going to open it up for some of the practical suggestions that we've made.
For the practical suggestions for communication, the first one is verbal. In the movie, Victor struggles to communicate at first because he doesn't speak English well. Instead of giving up, he listens closely, watches body language, and repeats key words until he understands. This teaches us that verbal communication isn't just about speaking, but it's also about slowing down, being patient, and making sure people feel understood.
Nonverbal, better learning the difference between nonverbal acts of distress and nonverbal acts of aggression may result in better chances of de-escalation in tense situations, namely the medicine scene with Victor, the guards, and the Russian man. If the guards saw his actions as distress more than aggression, the situation may have been able to de-escalate without Victor needing to lie.
For Hofstede's cultural dimensions, it highlights how communication with Victor can be improved through cultural awareness. Things like personal connections, clear instructions, step-by-step guidance, and patience are various ways that can help for better communication.
Going on to the spectrum of stereotypes, it's best not to act out on them, seeing as how they are shallow and demeaning in most situations used against Victor. Instead, actual conversation or bonding goes a long way for development.
And I'd say having openness to other cultures, instead of being hesitant to make relations with people from other cultures, you should be willing to open up and willing to create those relationships because you never know how strong of friendships can come to this, just like Victor and Enrique.
During this presentation, we have analyzed the intercultural dimensions of the film, including the verbal and nonverbal communication styles present, Hofstede's cultural dimensions theory as it relates to the film, the stereotypes within the film, and how the film portrays intercultural relationships. It was fascinating to analyze and do a deep dive into these different intercultural dimensions of the film, The Terminal. Now to references.
Beautiful.
Cool.
Thank you for listening. Sorry, you guys.